I've prepared this presentation. But in the last 5 minutes or so after we're done here, Hilton will just be speaking. It's 2 plus 2 for the price of 1. Hilton will just be speaking for 5 minutes or so, just about the legislative amendments. I did do a presentation at the Saiosh conference, but just a condensed version, so that you just know, as the Master Builders Western Cape and Saiosh members, what exactly it is that we are busy amending at this point in time. Okay? So this just the outline. Is it okay? I'll just continue. Yeah, because it's just flickering. So this is just the table of contents. We don't have to go through it. And my employer is the Department of Employment and Labor. As the DG always says, the Department of Employment and Labor is one department. And the only thing that they do is they second resources to the entities like UIF, CF, but everybody works for the Department of Employment and Labor. So I think it's important just to indicate to you what is the vision of the Department of Employment and Labor and how we as occupational health and safety fits into the vision of the Department of Employment and Labor. So the Department of Employment and Labor strives for a labor market which is conducive and to investment, economic growth, employment creation, and decent work. So how do we fit in? Because I believe most of you are working for an employer, most of you might be having your own business, and you are health and safety practitioners. So what we do as my unit in the Department of Employment and Labor, and with your assistance, is that we create a labor market that is conducive. And a conducive labor market is where we have a working environment where a worker can go to the working environment and leave that working environment in the same condition as he entered the working environment. So everything that we do, my job description, everything that I do on a daily basis is to make sure that there's a conducive working environment that is safe and does not impact the health of the worker. And also, that there's decent work. Decent work has a portion of making sure that people get paid the right amount of money, making sure that there's basic conditions of employment, making sure that there's occupational health and safety practices. So decent work comes from the International Labour Organization. So that's our main focus, is to create a conducive environment. If I sit and I receive applications for approved inspection authority, I receive applications for government certificate of competency. I get a lot. That's the one thing that I've realized with this position, is that I deal with a lot of paper and a lot of certificates, making sure that everybody gets certified and you are able to do the function that you need to do, that empower the OHS Act and the regulations empowers you to do. So with the mission of the Department of Employment and Labor, they need to ensure that there's appropriate legislation and regulations. So this is a key function, is the appropriate legislation and regulations. And me and my team, we are responsible for the Occupational Health and Safety Act, as well as its regulations. Currently, the Occupational Health and Safety Act is under review. And we have a technical committee consisting out of organized business and organized labor that is going through the public comments and incorporating public comments. And there's a process that we are following. I was saying to Leighton, I didn't know that he's Ben Risk. So he was telling me, I sent you an email yesterday, it's either from Leighton or Ben Risk. I'm like, oh, so you are Ben Risk. You are Ben Risk. And the reason why I know Ben Risk is I'm going through the public comments and incorporating them, and I have a lot of comments on risk assessment and risk and hazard and definitions and the new section 7, new section 8 from Ben Risk. Saiosh also a lot. So that's how I know that there is Ben Risk. So it's part of our functions. Then our functions is also inspections and enforcement, where first of all, we do advocacy. Part of the reason why I'm here today is because in our operational plan, we plan to do advocacy. So why I'm here is to do advocacy, so that we do it for the professionals, we also do it for employers, we do it for employees, and then after we've done advocacy, we do inspections, and after our inspections, there's then enforcement, where if you don't comply, then we enforce. And I think you are fully aware of the proposed amendments. I'm saying proposed because we're still going through it, and it's a consultative process which strengthens enforcement and even gives inspectors an opportunity potentially to give spot fines, quite significant amount of spot fines, because as you know, the fines that we have and the penalties are so, people can budget for it. Then protection of workers' rights, and workers have a right to a safe and healthy work environment. And the others I'm not going to go through because it is mainly related to the other legislation. But what is very important is promote social dialogue, where when it comes to occupational health and safety, where we do our social dialogue is with the advisory council. I think you were on the advisory council, Niels? Yeah, is on with the advisory council, which consists out of organized business and organized labor. I know that Neil Ensland from Master Builders KZN is currently on the advisory council and also on the technical committee. So we do have representation from business and from labor with all our policies, every single regulation before it gets published. I know the MHI regulations were published in the beginning of the year, has to go through a process of social dialogue, tripartite structure, organized business, organized labor, and government. Then there's the values. I'm not going to go through the values. So occupational health and safety has a constitutional mandate. So the former Commissioner Mafata, used to say to me, Milly, when you tell people what kind of work you do, you tell them that I derive my job description directly from the Constitution. So where it speaks about everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful to their health and their well-being. So the work that you do as health and safety professionals and practitioners and consultants, it's making sure that there's in the Constitution where there's a right to an environment, because you are creating an environment that makes sure that it's not harmful to the health and the well-being and the safety of workers, comes from the Constitution. So what we do as health and safety professionals, occupational health professionals, comes from the Constitution. And then also the Constitution says that the state must make reasonable legislation. So that is why we have our Occupational Health and Safety Act, as well as its regulations. And we derive it also from the Constitution. So the Constitution then sets a clear demand to ensure a safe and healthy working environment for everyone. And it is important that we have the Occupational Health and Safety Act and its regulations. And as we are aware, in the long title of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, it's not only a worker or employer-employee relationship, but also those that are impacted by that activities or that relationship. So it stretches a little bit more. That's why it's directly linked to the Constitution. So you can tell your family what I do, I derive it from the Constitution. So it is really important that we do what we need to do. Oh, now it's doing effects, but it's okay. So the policy mandate of the Department of Employment and Labor is to improve economic efficiency and productivity, and then creation of decent employment. I've spoken to that. Also promoting labor standards and fundamental rights at work. So occupational health and safety is a fundamental right at work. And then enhancing occupational health and safety awareness and compliance in workplaces. So awareness is very key for us as the Department of Employment and Labor, because we know that doesn't help that we just go and we just issue notices. Sometimes people are ignorant, and we have our small, medium, micro enterprises as well as the informal economy, where we need to do a lot more advocacy, because sometimes they think it's very expensive to have a occupational health and safety management system where just simple changes can have a major impact on the lives of workers. Then also social dialogue. I've spoken to social dialogue and the importance of the tripartite structure. Then with regard to the working population, if we look at the working population, we have about 39 million people in South African citizens that is of working age. And if the labor force survey in the first quarter of 2022 indicated that we have about 10.2 million labor force in the formal employment sector. So there's 10.2 million workers that needs to ensure that we need to ensure that they work in a safe and healthy working environment. There's 10.2 million people that is covered by the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases Act. Just like FEM and RMA is a licensee of the Compensation Fund, so the Compensation Fund is the hand that feeds FEM and RMA, because they give them a license and say, do this work on my behalf in this particular sector. So they cover about 10.2 million, that's formal. Then there's about 2.8 million people in the informal economy. And the Department of Employment and Labor, as well as the ILO, is putting a lot of focus currently on the informal economy, and how do we make sure that in the informal economy, there's a conducive environment. Very difficult, but it's doable when it comes to the informal economy. Then there are about 1.1 million workers in private households. Those are our gardeners, our domestic workers. And then there's about 0.8 million in the agricultural sector. So you can see we're going to almost 13-14 million workers that are working, doing some form of work, and they need to work in a health and safe working environment. So even an employer that is in a domestic or private household need to ensure that the environment that the worker is working in is safe. I believe you are fully aware that the Compensation for Occupational Injuries and Diseases bill was passed in the month of April, and it's now clearly stipulated that employers that have domestic workers need to now register with the Compensation Fund. There was that case of Ms. Mahlangu that fell into the pool and she passed on, and it went as far as the Constitutional Court, where the Constitutional Court ruled that it is important and that we have to cover domestic workers. So if you have domestic workers, you now need to register with CF for your domestic workers, so that if anything happens to your domestic worker and there's a fatality or there's any form of serious injury, then they are covered by CoID. So, and this also has an impact on the Occupational Health and Safety Act. I think the DG said it in the Saiosh conference when he was speaking about this particular point, and it's something that he personally, when I started, indicated that we need to now make sure that the OHS Act is also aligned with the CoID, because there are challenges with our inspectors to enter a private household. They can't just rock up at a private household and go and do an inspection. So it's something that we need to look into as the technical committee on how do we make sure that gets transferred into the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and how do we empower inspectors to be able to have access to private households. So it's quite, because there's so many private households, it's something that we need to look into, but there needs to be some form of empowerment, because currently, if they need to do some work, then they have to go to the police, and the police must accompany them, and it's not always possible. So it's something that we need to look into. We haven't put much thought into it, but it's something that we need to look into. The other thing that's also very important when it comes to private households is, right now, a household, if you're working from home, it's your office, and it's your working space. And if you get injured, then there needs to be, there needs to go to the compensation fund, and it becomes very, very tricky. So there's a need also for us to have regulations when it comes to working from home, because there's a duty of the employer, there's a duty of the employee. Because people were asking me funny questions in one conference that I went to, is that if I go and I make tea and it's in my house and hot water falls on my feet and I get burnt, well, the employer covered because I was working. If I go up the stairs to go to the bathroom and I fall and it's between 8 and 4, is it an injury on duty? So you can see, this is something that we really need to look into as the Department of Employment and Labor with our social partners, and that's the whole working from home. And what is the role? Because employers are asking. When I was at CF, they were asking, I know Transnet was consistently asking this particular question. What do we do as an employer? Because we've now given people an opportunity to work from home, but if the person gets injured or something happens, is it my responsibility to provide them with a chair at home, with a desk? If the person is staying in a shack, what is my responsibility? You understand? It becomes very, very, very tricky. So I'm telling you this just to think about it, because it's something that we need to grapple with and need to come up with some form of regulations in this particular area, because it is becoming a norm for people to work from home. Employers have seen that they can save millions per month in rental by reducing the space that they are renting. So this is just our footprint. We are now in the Western Cape. We do have inspectors here in the Western Cape, Occupational Health and Safety Specialist. It's Fuzeka Ngalo, and she reports to David Iso, and we do have inspectors that are electrical, mechanical qualifications, health qualifications, etc. So CF, like I said, has funded more than 500 inspectors, and the Western Cape did get a significant portion of those 500 inspectors. This is just our targets. I'm not going to go through it, but we do about 98,000 inspections in the field of occupational health and safety per annum. We also make sure that we look at non-compliant employers that we need to serve with notices, and then also referred for prosecution. And then we also have conferences and seminars. We are going to have a conference in August, quite a big one. Our target will be the iron and steel sector. And then we're going to have another one in November that will be more broad, taking all sectors into consideration. The one will be in KZN, the November one, and the August one will be in Gauteng. We're looking to going towards the Vaal, because the Vaal area is where we have a lot of iron and steel related matters. Then this is just our service delivery indicator so that you know what we do. Registration and resolution of labor-related complaints. We get a lot of those. I was with Hilton at the hotel having breakfast and got a call of people being stuck in a lift and etc. So I'm getting strange calls, but I'm getting a lot of calls with regard to complaints, or even complaints about working conditions, etc. And then registration of incidents related to the OHS Act, and that is where we get incidents and we have to do the work. And then quite a significant amount of work that I'm doing currently is registration of entities, where somebody's saying, I've written an exam, I've passed my exam, I need to be appointed as a GMR2, and so I get a lot of those. So also your AIAs, first aid training providers. So there's a lot of administration in this area. Then exemptions, this is also something that I'm getting flooded with from big organizations, small organizations, where they don't want to, they want to be exempted because they have an alternative. And then appeal on the decision of an inspector. This has also started flooding my desk, where an inspector has issued a prohibition notice or contravention notice, and the employer is of the opinion that the notice is not correct, and then I have to make a decision on whether, in my decision, if they want to appeal my decision, then they must go to court. They can't go anywhere else except go to court if I've given a ruling on this particular decision. Then GCC examinations, like I said, this is also quite a number of it. Then, just to give you an indication, I saw there's a presentation by FEM. They'll go into what is in the construction sector. But for the 2022-23 financial year that just passed, the compensation fund has paid over 3.2 billion rand in benefits. That is to people that have gotten injured in the form of temporary total disablement, where they've been booked off maybe for 6 months due to a brain injury or back injury, where they had to go for surgery. So, and this is also where they've paid pensions for people that are more than 31% disabled. So it has come down a little bit, in 2020 because of COVID. And then in 2021, it went to 4 billion. And then 2022, there was also a bit of a reduction in it. And the reason why there was a reduction also in 2022 was the compensation fund implemented a new system. And what used to happen before is that third parties could submit claims on behalf of employers. And now we've stopped it. So there's a lot of claims that they have not submitted as third parties because the onus is now on the employer. Because you'll find that sometimes claims are being submitted, and then when you go to an employer, employers are not aware of it. So there was a lot of controls that were put in place. But the 3.2 million is a lot. It was about 4 during my tenure, even going up to 5 billion rand. And that is why the Department of Employment and Labor identified the Occupational Health and Safety, Inspectorate as a key priority in funding it and making sure that there's more resources that can prevent and can serve as a deterrent, so that they then ultimately save money in this particular area, where they can reinvest the money and have more money available for prevention. I believe the reason why you have FEM here is because FEM values prevention, and they've realized that having partnerships with yourselves helps them to reduce expenses on injuries and diseases. So the compensation fund, even the session that we will be having in August, RMA is partnering with the OHS Inspectorate in that advocacy event to make sure that we reduce injuries and diseases. So this is quite a lot. And in my 5 years at the compensation fund, I was glad because I've done 360. I was on the other side like you, whilst I was working for the NEL and NEXA, and then I came to the regulator, and then I went to reactive, and now I'm back at proactive and partially reactive. I've seen that prevention is key. So for me, my priority and the legacy that I want to leave when I leave is more focus on prevention, a significant amount of focus on prevention of injuries and diseases. And I believe you are here today for that purpose. So it's really important that we need to prevent injuries and diseases as the Occupational Health and Safety Fraternity. Then the ILO also speaks about the fact that there's over more than 4 million occupational accidents in South Africa. That's what the ILO is estimating, because there is quite a significant amount of underreporting. And as you saw the sectors that we were going through, you'll find that it's only the formal sector where there's about 10 million people working there that are reporting injuries and diseases. The others won't even know that they have to report, or because they don't pay levies, they're not reporting at all. They send somebody to the clinic, the nearest clinic, and say, no, go and have it sorted out. They don't even know that they have an occupational disease contracted from the work that they've been doing in the informal economy for maybe 20 years. They don't know about PPE, nothing. So there is a lot of underreporting that is taking place. So that's why there's a lot of work being done in the informal economy. So we need to prevent occupational injuries and diseases. And the reason why we need to do that is because, first of all, it's the lives of people that are at stake. It's their health that is at stake. So we literally play a very, very important role in prevention. And secondly, there's a lot of money that gets spent in this particular area when it comes to occupational injuries and diseases. So the social cost is a lot. There's not only is it the health and the safety of the worker that gets impacted, but even their families. Because you find that somebody got injured, lost 2 arms. I've seen one person at CF lost 2 arms and a leg. And people that work for your ESCOMs and this high voltage, and they lose legs and arms, literally. And it has an impact not only on them, but on their family, because they need to be reintegrated after being in hospital for months. They need to be reintegrated into their families. It has an impact on the children and the wives and the husbands. So there's that whole social impact, and that is why the compensation fund in the Act, what is very specific now, is rehabilitation and reintegration and of workers back into the working environment, and also rehabilitation and reintegration socially. That's why the compensation fund is investing in social rehabilitation, because sometimes you just send the worker back. The worker's now a pensioner, maybe getting less money than what they were getting from the employer, and they just have to carry on, and they are now a pensioner for life. And nobody looks after their mental well-being and assisting them and their family to cope with what has happened. So all of that is what we can prevent. And if we prevent that, then there is room for instance, compensation fund and its licensees to invest back and sponsor things like this, because the CoID Act does make provision for it. That's why they've taken over hundreds of millions of rands in funding the OHS Inspectorate. Then there is areas that we can focus on to drive improvement of occupational health and safety. You'll tell me that I can talk. Tell me when my time is up.
You've got half an hour still.
Okay, dankie.
It's a pleasure.
Okay. So the benefits of prevention is important for our workers, their families, as well as the communities, and then also for the organization that they work for, where if you have less injuries, less diseases, you have people that are more at work, and you get people that are more productive, because sometimes the working environment that's not conducive impacts on staff morale, and it has an impact on productivity. So the employer, I'm now preaching to the converted, the employer needs to make sure that they have health and safety management systems in place and prevention thereof, because it will benefit them ultimately. And also, if you have a productive workforce, it contributes, to the turnover. And also what we have is there's a lot of workers that become a burden to the already burdened public healthcare sector, where you'll find that somebody like, for instance, in Gauteng goes to a Steve Biko or Bara and go and sit in the queues with everybody that's there for all sorts of other matters, where some of them, could have been prevented. So just regarding the OHS strategy that we have, I'm going to go through this briefly because I want to give Hilton about 10 minutes of my time, 2 for the price of 1. The OHS strategy, this was developed between the ILO, Organized Business, Organized Labor, where there's a strategy that has been developed, and it's also, the aim of it is to address poor and weak prevailing standards in occupational health and safety in South Africa, and also where it needs to look at how do we improve occupational health and safety over the next 5 years. Then there's a vision for the strategy. We will be doing some little bit more work on it, but I'm just giving you the overview of the strategy that we're going to follow for the next 5 years. Is that we will have occupational health and safety that strives for a labor market that is conducive for every worker to work in a healthy and safe workplace. You can see it's very much aligned to the vision of the Department of Employment and Labor. And the mission is to ensure effective compliance and collaboration to ensure healthier and safer workplaces. As you can see, collaboration is very important. We can't do it alone. We need you as professionals in the field. We need the employer and we need the employees to be able to ensure that we attain our vision. Then if we look at our strategy goals and objectives, is to promote healthy, safe, productive. Productive is very important, and quality lives in the public and private sector employment in South Africa. So it's not only the private sector. At the session with Niels there in Gallagher, there was somebody that was just venting and working for the public sector, where sometimes it looks like the public sector is exempted from all of this, but they are not. The public sector is not exempted. The public sector need to ensure that they also comply with the Occupational Health and Safety Act and its regulations. Then the strategic objectives is to have a coherent and effective legislation and policy. And this is through the amendment of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. And there's a lot of amendments that we've done and we're still doing on the regulations. So the second one is structure, cooperation, capacity, strengthen and develop. So capacity building is very important for the inspectorate, as well as for yourselves, as well as for the employer and the employee. And that is why we are investing in having workshops, seminars, training sessions, etc. It's a big portion of the work that Hilton and them do. Then enforcement and labor inspection. That's what we do on a daily basis, and that's what our inspectors are doing on a daily basis. OHS management system and prevention of risk management at enterprises. In the Occupational Health and Safety Act that went out for public comment, can I see who gave inputs into the comments for, okay, I see hands, not so many hands. Did you know that the Occupational Health and Safety Act went out for public comment? Oh, I can see you saying yes. So Saiosh was representing you. There's a lot of yeses. So yeah, the OHS management systems is something that's very key in there. And as we're going through the process of sifting through the public comments, because we have a deadline, I have a deadline. Hilton is my second in charge. He's helping a lot. I've stolen him from construction work a little bit to help me with the OHS Act. We have until the first week of August to make sure that all the public comments, we've looked at it, and that it leaves my office by mid-August to go to the minister by end August. So that's a tight deadline. That's why we're meeting now every second week for 2 days. We met last week for 2 days. Monday and Tuesday we're meeting again for 2 days as a TC. And I think we're going a bit slow because we have a lot of comments and a lot of debates. So we've now decided that the first week of August we're going to do a boss parade with the TC for a whole week. They didn't want to, but we managed to get the TC to agree that the first week of August, come hell or high waters, we are going to go to a boss parade for 5 days, even if it means that we have to work till 11 o'clock at night and sleep in a specific place. But we need to work through this because this went out for comment some time ago. There was delays beyond my control, but we now need to make sure that we get this out. Because the challenge with the OHS bill has been under amendment since 2009. I don't want to leave a legacy of having a bill that is perpetually under amendment. So be on the lookout, but also please just note that there is going to be a second opportunity and a third opportunity for comments. That will be when it's in Parliament. Because when it's in Parliament, Parliament will have public hearings where you can do a presentation to the portfolio committee. When it's done with the portfolio committee, it then goes to the select committee, which is at the National Council of Provinces, where they also have a round of public comment and they open up. They spend a number of days where they give you an opportunity to come and present. It will be referred back to, for instance, me and the minister, where we need to look at what people are saying. So there will be other opportunities because I can give you a brief. We can't incorporate every single public comment. It's not possible. We'll go through it. Some of it we'll say, no, this is not feasible. And we'll give a reason why it's not feasible to incorporate this one. There might be 3 that gets incorporated, but there's 1 that we can't incorporate. So you'll get another opportunity in Parliament to do so. Then proactive research data collection is something that we're not doing as much as the Department of Employment and Labour as we should. And so we need to do research and data collection. So that is something that we'll be focusing on in the next 5 years. So when it comes to policies, I'm not going to go into it because I want Hilton to just take maybe 5-10 minutes just to tell you what we're busy with and maybe focus on what he's busy doing in the construction sector, because I believe most of you are from the construction sector, ne? I can see a lot of nods, yeah. So there is the bill, and it is to harmonize with national and international principles, where we look at an increased focus on prevention, looking at the rights and the duties, also OSH management systems in workplaces. It's become, Section 7 speaks to that, social dialogue in workplaces, and then reporting of occupational accidents. So there's also violence and harassment in workplaces. As you know, there was a code that was issued last year. So looking at, that, and then roles of professionals in the implementation of OSH policy and also improve legislation. Hilton will be speaking to the legislation. Then there is some work that we are doing with structure, cooperation, capacity, and strengthening. Remember, we had those key highlights, and advocacy programs is very important for us, as well as training. We do have some projects that the department started, some they've put on ice, but we're looking at resuscitating it and looking at projects. And then also the establishment of occupational hygiene laboratory. I was in a session this week with the Inspector General and the ILO, where the ILO is now having a project in the construction industry. It's funded by the Swedish government for a period of 3 years, where they want to look at piloting. So we need to identify pilot sites where they want to look at mainly small, micro, and maybe informal construction sector, and look at what are the issues when it comes to labor laws and the implementation thereof. It's for the SADC region, so they've identified South Africa, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe as the 3 countries that will be running this project for 3 years, where they want to come up with sort of like a toolkits in the construction sector that will ultimately be presented to the SADC countries and what they can do based on the findings and to improve, the working conditions for workers in the construction sector. So it's something that is really very critical. We are going to have to look at employers in the construction industry that needs to maybe form part of our technical committee for South Africa, and then looking at unions in the construction industry. And we need to then identify our pilot sites very carefully. So maybe some of you, I can pick your brains in what you think would be good pilot sites to look at this, because the ILO want to look at the construction industry and actually see what are the challenges and preventing compliance to labor legislation, and how do we make it easier for the construction industry to comply, not only with Occupational Health and Safety Act, minimum wages and basic conditions of employment. How do we holistically look at workers in the sector? In our deliberations, they've already done a pilot study, very high level, and that is why they decided to fund this big project in 3 countries, where they found that it's not only like the ILO put it, the contractors are doing well, subcontractors are doing well, but there are people that are, they say subcontracting to the 3rd and the 4th level. And that is where, it falls through the cracks. And that is what they want to look at, is that person that is subcontractor number 5 in the whole value chain. How do we help them to comply? What is it? Why are they not complying? And how do we help them to comply? So it's fully funded by the Swedish government, and then they want it to be sustainable after the 3 years. The project just started now in May. They are still in the inception phase, and so I'm just mentioning it because there are some things that the ILO is doing with us in the construction industry. Then, with regard to inspections, I'm not going to go through it, but we need to make sure that we uphold Vision Zero, and that is to make sure that road to zero injuries and diseases, how do we prevent injuries and diseases, and also looking at good practices, and how do we use technology during our inspections to make sure that we improve efficiencies of our OHS inspectorate. Then OHS management systems and risk management. This is something that is very key in the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it's something that we will have to trash out, because some of the public comments that we have seen, people want us to be prescriptive, and the purpose of the act is not to be very prescriptive. So some of the comments we've seen is that they want us to be very, very, very prescriptive in health and safety management systems, and we can't go there. We will give what is the basics, and it will be up to the employer, because as soon as you become prescriptive, there's employers, that will be able to have a Rolls Royce, but there are those ones that will have to have your Beetle that's, you beat up as you go along. It gets you there, but slower. Yeah. So we need to cater for all the employers. Then stakeholders for us is very important, for me personally. And also our beneficiaries are very important. And as you can see, it's employers, organized labor, organized business, educational institutions where we need to do work with them. And then with yourself, there you can see there's professional bodies and statutory institutions, non-statutory institutions. So we know that we can't do implementation of a strategy and how to improve occupational health and safety over the next 5 years without you. And it's important that we need to have an implementation plan on what is it that we want to achieve, clear goals over the next 5 years when it comes to occupational health and safety. What is our outcomes? And what is it that we need to be able to achieve these outcomes? Do we need external resources, internal? What do we do? Do we need more inspectors, or do we need more training for our inspectors? Do we need technology? What is it that we need to be able to make sure that we as the Department of Employment and Labour service our clients? And we know that we need also collaboration in order to make sure that if we have a 5-year plan, how do we achieve this 5-year plan? And an implementation plan is a living document. As things go along, you can change it. It's not that it's stagnant and cast in stone for 5 years, but that's what we're looking at. Like I said, there was work that was done with organized business, organized labor, as well as the ILO. Then monitoring and evaluation is very important, because we can have all these nice visions and strategies and plans, but if we don't monitor the impact of it, because like I said to my team members, CF is paying our salaries. CF is investing hundreds of millions of rands in prevention of OHS. We need to give CF back value for money. And the only way we can give CF value back for money is by prevention, and when there is injuries and diseases that have taken place, use them, find out what's the root cause and address the root cause to prevent it, even in our reactive work. So we need to then make sure that when we do monitoring and evaluation, we need to evaluate impact, because it doesn't help that we say that we want to do a lot of things, but we're not able to evaluate the impact thereof. So it is the Departments of Labour's responsibility to continuously monitor the strategic framework and the undertaken actions from all the social partners. So just as a take home, when Hilton will just come, it is important that we need to make sure that we prepare as occupational health and safety professionals and prevent instead of repair and repent. And when we repent, repent is the word is derived from a penthouse, which is high, and is turn back. So you have to repent and say, oh my word, somebody has lost 2 arms and 2 legs because they got electrocuted. And what I should have done is I should have done a mini risk assessment. I should have checked that the line is switched off and this person is now sitting without arms and legs for the rest of their life. So let us prepare, having strategies and programs in place, and let's do implementation. It's good to have documents, but implementation is very key so that we then prevent and not repent. Thank you. Wilton?